Hello. So today I want to talk a little bit about what happens on turn six of every Civ game you will ever play. And that is the decision: am I building a monument or am I building a worker? As we dive into this, um, it's really important that we have a foundation of a very strong six turns, so we can really understand how to make the best decision possible on turn six. The first thing is that I have here is to always build two scouts. I have played a lot of single scout in the past, where you open scout and then you go straight into a monument. Um, I do not really prefer single scout, and sometimes you have very niche situations where you can play it. You should not play it frequently. It's not sustainable. It can cause you to make the wrong decision, the wrong worker monument decision, and if you do make the wrong worker or monument decision, your game is a lot worse for it. And you see a lot less of your land. You have a lot less information. You have to make it earlier, and you see less because of it. So the second point here is warrior scouting is the most early information on your land. Efficient warrior scouting will set you up the strongest for this turn six decision, right? Uh, that being said, sometimes your warrior just gets stuck, but really understanding what the map looks like, right, where you are in the map, where you should be scouting, right, and the scouting the six turns, first six turns, will enable you to really make the right decision here. Which brings to the second point. When you scout, the goal is to scout contested land first. Now, generally, on turn zero, you send your warrior in one direction, and you don't know what that direction is going to be. You don't know if that's towards another player. You don't know if that's towards Tundra. You don't know if you're in the corner. You don't know if you're in the middle. However, as you see with the point before, there are a bunch of indicators on the map that will enable you to show where you are on the map or give you an idea of where you are on the map without actually seeing another player, without actually seeing all of your land, right? And those three things are coast, jungle, and tundra. If you see tundra, you know you're towards the top of the map. If you see jungle, you know that's the jungle line that's in the middle of every map. There's like a five-tile jungle line. Or there's tundra, right? So tundra, or there's coast, right? So coast can be a little bit deceiving. Coast usually means you're in a corner, right, of the map, right, or on the edge of the map. But sometimes there can be inland seas, right, which can kind of skew your judgment, right? Um, the other thing is that you want to meeting people early, right, should affect, right, your decision to build a monument or not, right? Knowing what civs in the draft or what civs are next to you, like what players are next to you, what players are close to you if you're meeting them in the first six turns, um, what players, who's playing the game, right? It's much different if I have spray and pray next to me than if I have someone, I don't know, some noob, right? Spray's a very aggressive player. I'm not gonna click Piety next to Spray, right? Um, or sometimes there's really aggressive civs that are next to you. If you're next to fucking Zulu, right, you're gonna sell differently than if you're next to Madagascar, for example, right? Um, the last point is that the regionals don't mean your land, right? But they can indicate how much land you might have, right? If you only scout in kind of like let's say you've scouted north, south, and west, right? And you've seen no copies of your regional, right? And there's map there, but there's more map to your right, right? The way regionals work is you spawn within a box, right? A box that's deemed your land, and your regionals also spawn in that box, right? But sometimes people get moved to the edges of their box, right? So there are times where my regional will spawn four tiles from another player's capital, right? That's never my land. I'm never allowed to settle four tiles from their capital. However, sometimes I can scout in a direction towards another player. I can meet that player. I can realize we have space. I haven't seen any of the copies of my regional between me and them. So my box might be in the complete other direction, right? And I might have more land over there, right? Seeing how many regions you have, and sometimes maps funny. Like this is not a hard and fast rule, right? Sometimes there's only five copies of regionals that spawn. Sometimes you get like none of your regionals on a game. Like you're like, I don't know where they are. But they can be an indicator of I might have more land out there. So it's very important to know. So after the first six turns, this is really the point of the slide in general, right? Is that scouting in the first six turns is so important. people underplay how important playing the first six turns properly are. So you have the decision to set up the rest of your game, right? Sometimes the decision to build a monument or a worker is really really simple after these double scouts, right? Sometimes it's much more complicated, and we'll show a couple examples. But that doesn't mean that it's easy, right? It doesn't like scouting well, give you the most information possible, is important, right? Map runes can help with this, right? Like city state locations and other things can help. Everything I've indicated here, right? Like knowing about being this is really smart scouting, right? But it all leads into this decision. So it's turn six, right? Let's talk about the nuances of what a monument or a worker does, right? So a lot of people are like, oh my god, how do I know if I'm playing? How do I know if I'm playing tradition or liberty, right? Like new players would say this on turn six. That's so early. Like I have to build a monument or build a worker, and I have to decide between one of the two. Well, the reality is you don't have to know if you're playing monument or tradition. You just have to know if you're not playing. Sorry, you don't know if you you don't know if you have to you're playing liberty or tradition on turn six. You just have to know if you're not playing tradition or not playing liberty. In the sense that piety and honor, right? You can play piety or honor with a monument. You can also play monument and piety or honor and piety off of a worker, right? So, what does that mean? So, when you build a monument, you're locking yourself out of playing tradition, and that's fine. You usually have the information to say that. When you build a worker, you're locking yourself out of playing liberty, and that's fine. Like you usually by turn six have enough information to do that, right? And some of the indicators that that lead either way, right? So on monuments, right? Am I selling on my luxes or my cities that look good on my map? Single lux, right? I might build a worker if this one city I want to sell that looks really good is picking up three luxuries, right? Um, that and they're all third ring. Like that would lead me more towards a worker, right? I build a worker if I don't have a ton of fresh water, right? Or there's no fresh water, right? That would lead me toward piety, honor, or tradition, right? Liberty needs a lot of fresh water. If I don't see a lot of fresh water or a lot of like long-term food and scaling, right? I build a worker, right? Conversely, if I see a lot of it, generally I lean more towards liberty, right? Because I think liberty is a little bit more of a stronger and a little bit more resilient tree. Um, I I lean that way when I see a lot of fresh water and the land looks fast, right? That's the next kind of point. I build a monument when I have room to settle in all directions, right? When I can settle east, north, south, and west, right? And I have good cities everywhere, right? That's when I'm like leaning towards liberty. I'm leaning towards that monument, right? Conversely, right? If I don't have a lot of room to settle, like I only have one or two good directions, I'm leaning towards trad, right? Or I'm leaning towards piety, right? Or honor, right? The next one's kind of like an honor indication. Honor really likes a monument. I believe you can play no monument piety or monument piety. I think they're both viable strategies. Um, but if you're leaning towards honor, right, and you're comfortable playing liberty, right, if you've met 2 to 3 city states that are 6 to 7 tiles away from the cap, right, with the opportunity to meet more, I would lean a monument. When you think maybe this is just honor, and if it's not honor, I can fall back onto liberty, right? Then yeah, I think a monument is a pretty viable build, right? Um, Conversely, right, like if you've even met city states or the terrain between you and the city states is rough, right? There's lots of jungle, rivers, forests, hills, right? It's not easy to get your units up to tribute the city states. The workers that you're stealing from the city states are really slow. It's not easy to move units between the city states. That's when honor is a lot worse, right? That's when you would lean more towards that worker because honor does like that monument before that work on turn six, right? The last kind of point I have is, do I have a fast faith source? Leans monument, right? So what that really means is a faith natural wonder or like an incense and cap, right? Um, that would lead me towards generally actually not in cap, but like something that I can get a really really fast pantheon. Like I'm talking about pantheons in like mid 20s, right? That leans me a little bit more towards liberty. The converse point is do I have a tradition leading pantheon? And what that is, like, we'll dive into more of this on a different video. Um, but I think Liberty really likes a fast demo pantheon. Tradition also likes pretty fast demo pantheon, but they can build henge to get it, right? So they can build a wonder after their settlers to secure that pantheon. They're not as dependent on the faith source. Now, when you lose henge and you don't have an alternate faith source, it really sucks on your tradition game. So don't get me wrong, right? But you have a little bit more optionality on how to adjust that. So and how to play around that. And then on the bottom, right? Like we have monument. You have like this is the liberty path. This is the tradition path. You can't do the opposites, right? But you can play piety or honor, right? So I have a couple. Oh, quick caveat: some civs are very tree specific. I have some of them listed down here. I think these civs, and there might be more, but always either want to play in this case piety or honor, right? We're not talking about that here. These civs bonuses usually are like, well, the civ either sucks or they're so overwhelming that like you want to play that one tree, right? Because you want to be playing your civ a little bit. I disregard these for these videos. These civs are rather limited because they push you in that direction so much. Um, so this is. I want to talk a little bit about land. I want to talk about a little bit about scouting, right? So I've highlighted my warrior moves, right? On initially, right, to show you like how important this early scouting is, and then talk about a little bit of this monument decision, right? So this warrior move is actually like pretty unfortunate, right? You see, I get pulled to the south because of that ruin, right? After turn, like that on the end of turn one, right? There's a little R here on the screen. That's so I get pulled towards the south over then to the right. The other thing is that this looks like a coastline. So initially it looks like I'm to the top right of the map, and I get kind of pulled into the jungle line. Actually, I don't know I'm the top right. I just know I'm on the top of the map. So I go down here. I want to kind of see. I meet Masaru, and then my warrior kind of gets stuck. And because of this, I'm actually like making much worse information decisions on this monument build or worker build because of that, right? I build my two scouts. I see a fast Aluru, right? And I see some land. Here, I don't have a hard and fast what I'm going to play. What I know is this Ivory Pantheon's pretty good, but on tradition, right? The ritual sacrifice, but I don't. That Pantheon really likes you to settle like on these ivories if you can in these tradition cities, which the ivory cities just the expansions just don't look very traditional. Like maybe there's a city here near my initial warrior moves that doesn't look great. Like the city over here, it's like maybe I can third ring this, but it doesn't look like there's hills, right? Like there's the land just doesn't look very tradition. Um, the best tradition city is actually in the south, but it's pretty slow, right? It's this like banana spot down here. Um, because of that, I'm pretty confident I'm going to build a monument here. Could you play tradition and make this work? Right? Maybe. Right? Like I don't really. Unfortunately, like sometimes you scout like this and your warrior kind of gets stuck and you don't see that much of your land. And that's the other thing. I kind of think I have coasts on both sides. So if this is an inland sea, I might be kind of blocked off from kind of the rest of the map, especially with how rough this terrain is. Right? So I would build a monument here pretty clearly, and I think that's okay. And as we look, right, I would be very happy with my monument decision, right? I have this fast Aluru, right? This is plenty good enough Liberty land. It's not the best Liberty land I've ever seen, but you could be happy playing Liberty. Actually, I think I would play a pretty greedy wide piety here if I figured it out early enough, because I just have no neighbors. That this is kind of sit around and sim to space, right? But because this inland sea is blocking you off from just the other guy that's your top right neighbor, and this south guy you don't know this, but this lake is really blocking you off. So I think monument's probably correct here. I think playing trad here could be a little miserable. I think you can make it work, but I would definitely lean a wider tree. Next example, let's talk about this. So I want to talk about my warrior movement because I think it's also very important to talk about like this early scouting so you have the best information. I think here I have a lot more information than I had in the last time. So on turn zero, I stepped on this hill. I stepped on the dies. I knew this was the jungle line. I didn't want to traverse through the jungle line. I didn't want to go up here, so I came down. I see a rune here. I pick it up, but I also right around here. I think when I step on here on three, I see the Arabian warrior, right? So I get an embassy with him, I think he's gonna go down this way, right? So I kind of go. I want to go up and around, right, and see anything up here because I know he has all the ruins and all the information over here. This is also just not my land, right? The thing that I do is my first scout that pops out. I think on turn four comes down here, right? I think onto the stone probably, or maybe it's down here. It can't go on the stone. Probably the stone, something like this, or here, something like that, to kind of contest the ruins before his warrior can get down and kind of contest them, right? It's AI fucking moving, so like they don't know how to move, they don't know how to scout. But I want to get my ruins in this area, and it is good for. That's why I'm bringing my warrior up because I know this scout's gonna kind of do a loop around this way, and this scout's gonna like collect everything else over here, right? My warrior kind of gets stuck in jail because there's not much up here other than the CS. Like the CS are I'm not settling past the CS, right? So that being said, right, like I'm kind of thinking about monument or worker, right? And on this start, right, I have these mining luxes, I have a ton of hammers, right? I have, some fresh water, right? Three nice rivers that I could probably settle on. Um, I think honestly you could go either way, right? I would lean a little bit more like the first thing I see is I really like a city here. The issue with the city here is it's one city for all these luxes. If you think you're settling on this marsh, right, which is a settle on three, I think you are playing tradition, right? If you want to settle like here on this grassland, or you want to settle like and maybe build Petra, right? Like that's also like this could also be a tradition city too, but you could probably fit a little bit more in here, right? If you want to settle this marble from above, I think you're crazy for doing this because you have to double buy to it always. Um, this like on this R would be a little bit more of a Liberty City, and I kind of map these out, but you know enough that you can make probably Liberty or Tradition work here. That's the other thing. I've only seen one copy of my regional, right? Now, my copies of my regional might be like here and here, like might be right in his face, and I might have no other land, and then I'd be forced into a little bit more aggressive play if I built a monument, right? Or I'd be forced into to play piety, right? Um, the other consideration I want, but my regional might be over here, right? I might not have seen them, and I might have more city spots, right? The other thing is with Troy and Mastro, right? They are city states, but they're kind of far, and there's rough terrain and hard to navigate. I could play honor here, but I would need like a city state here, a city state here, a city state here. I would need a lot more to really justify the honor pick. So let's look at the land, right? I looking at the land, right? Like the land is really, really rich down here. It's relatively rich up here. Um, it's you have some cities in here. I think Liberty would be fine. I also think Tradition would be fine. I think this is kind of one of those luxury capitals where you could kind of do either. And the other question is, could you play Honor, right? Um, it's a little difficult. Generally at Honor, I like a little bit more mid-map spawns. I would like another kind of CS here. The issue is that you're never actually killing Taipei if you kill these three, right? Because your city state, you can never kill Lima. That's way too far. You can kill Master, Troy, and Tashkent, but you're never gonna have time to kill all these three and then move all of your army down to Taipei and kill Taipei in a reasonable time. It's just not gonna be worth it. You can, but your game's gonna be much much slower. So I don't love the Honor pick, and I highlight some settler patterns, right? If I played Liberty, this is probably how I would settle. I would settle this city that's very fast for these luxuries. I would settle here for the cotton and double coastal. If you see these fish and you see this is a 5 fish city, it has the first ring hills from the capital luxuries or that you're going to buy. So it has the hills that it can work. You're going to buy the citrus. It's a better city than it looks. It's going to be able to cargo and get its infrastructure up. This city's quite good. It is a little far from you, but I think you're okay settling your regional here. I don't think he's going to settle on the other side of this. If he does settle on the other side of this river, it's going to be like right here, but probably something like here is what he'll settle, right, to pick up all these luxes. Um, I think this is a pretty reasonable settle pattern for Liberty, right? Every river or every city is on river, on freshwater or coastal, really strong land. The tradition settle pattern is this is probably what I would do. Um, there's a couple different ways you can settle this on tradition. You can also settle for a Petra, right? I think settling here is a pretty reasonable tradition city too. I think this is the strongest city in the area, right? I just think the tiles around here are the best. Um, you have the first ring chop too. I think this is pretty reasonable, right? Up here you have a nice Huey city long term, right? Pretty strong land, even though it's in the jungle. This city's incredibly strong as well. Like it's just you have a lot of options to do a lot of different things if you play tradition here. And this is a piety stone circle settle pattern. So the other thing that I want to call out is that hypothetically with these stone, let's say if this stone and this stone was grassland, you could definitely make a piety stone circles play here work, right? You have 3 stone and cap and marble, and then if 2 extra stone, that's probably enough that you could make piety work. You just want to be first ringing these stones because you're with your pantheon for so long, and you want to be improving them with quarries. So, the last thing I want to talk about here is worker monument on the coast. How does this differ? Well, you're making kind of a much different decision with monument or worker. The decision is really I build a monument if I have a lot of coastline and a lot of good inlands, right? That's when I'm leaning liberty. And or I build a monument if my capital doesn't have enough hammers, right? And I don't have a lot of space and I have to lean towards like a coastal piety. Worker if my cap has a lot of hammers and my expands look good, I play tradition. And that's really it with the coast, right? Like there's not that much with the coast um, that you make decisions on. So I'm gonna end it here. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope this helps with this decision a little bit. I see a lot of newer players kind of struggling with this decision earlier of how I pick a policy tree that earlier. And I hope this helps with some clarity. So